Good evening. Today's a special day because today we began an accounting that brings us back to the republic that we once were. The republic that is ours if we can keep it. And it's been somewhat tenuously connected to we the people in the last number of years. But today something important happened, which is that a man who thought he'd be king was brought down to have to answer to his charges in a courtroom in the very capital where he tried to seize power unlawfully. So, I consider today a day of joy. I know that the script seems to be that people go around saying it was sad. What is sad is that this man could exist in a position of authority in this country. That's sad. What's worse is that what he did was criminal with that position. Sad doesn't even begin to say what this crime is about. But I've listened to a number of things today. I spent my time writing. I have an appellate brief due on Monday. But I caught part of it and I stopped to see if there was anything to learn from the day of the arraignment. Most important direction this person, now on bail, formerly the President of the United States, got was don't commit any crimes and don't tamper with any jurors. Very interesting. The suggestion, obviously, is you're a mob-like figure that would do both. Commit crimes, try to get away with them, tamper with jurors. So, what do we learn from today? Well, there are several points of discussion going on about this case. And I thought I'd make a couple of remarks about them because I hear them often enough and they're very annoying. One is whether or not this is free speech. And for those that still scratch their heads about what they're talking about, it is talking without action is probably okay. But talking that prompts action, intended to prompt action, not so much. Talking about overthrowing the government, but it's sort of like the rule of thumb in any conspiracy. You have to take an act in furtherance of a criminal agreement. And that's not exactly the way the rule is, but if you're trying to understand it, I get very nervous when I hear people say publicly, you can say anything publicly, and you can lie publicly. Well, why is a person lying? They're lying and they're running for office, is that okay? They're lying and they're selling you a house? Well, they're selling you a house, that's an action, so they're deceiving you, they're committing a fraud on you. I tell you to sign... I got a shout out as they came by. They're telling you we can create electors and have them go forward. Well, that's not just free speech. So you see that the connection of speech plus action, depending on what the action is. Now, to make it a little more complicated, if you charge someone with a conspiracy, which is an agreement between two or more people to commit a crime, you need something a little more. They call them overt acts, but the overt acts don't have to be criminal. So, I don't know. I suppose that if you go and you talk to a senator about this crazy idea you have to overturn the election using bogus electors and claiming that there was fraud in the election and identifying a theory of law that has no standing in law, then you're in a genuine conspiracy. Now, the second thing that kind of bothers me is, what is Trump's knowledge? You know, what does he know? But they don't say it that way. They say, what does he believe? And I've been over this before, so those of you who've heard me say it, I'll try to say it a different way, which is, did he believe that he won? Okay, I think I even talked about this yesterday. And what person on this planet who pays even casual attention to what's going on thinks it is possible that he, quote, could believe he won? And then you have things like Bannon said that when it looked like Trump was going to lose, he said he would just say that there was fraud in the election. He said that Bannon said that in September. The night of the election, Rudy Giuliani, who was drunk, went to him and he gave him 4 words of advice. Just say we won. We have Trump talking to the Secretary of State in Georgia, telling him that he needs all these extra votes, which made him the loser in Georgia, plus 1 more vote, so that he would have as many plus 1 vote of what made Biden the winner of the Georgia race. It's amazing. And then, of course, there are a whole bunch of them, but one of my favorites is the problem with you, Pence, is that you're too honest, meaning Trump is not. And I heard Zoe Lofgren make a remark about that same one, and I think a lot of people are making that. So let's not wonder if he had knowledge of what was going on. And then we have this new thought, which is that, and I don't know why the lawyer was saying this, but it feels like he's an advocate for Trump. And it was that if you have unindicted co-conspirators, then Trump can't call them as witnesses because they're unindicted co-conspirators, and so he's denied the ability to defend himself. Well, let's run the traps on that one. What if they were all indicted, and they were all indicted with him? Then they think they would get the lay for it, maybe. Or, say you're one of the low-level unindicted co-conspirators. Do you want to be tried with Trump? I don't think so. So you'd seek a severance. You might or might not get it. And at the separate trial or the joint trial, you might decide not to take the stand. And you couldn't be called by Trump to take the stand and have a jury hear that the person was taking the Fifth Amendment because they didn't want to testify at the trial. And you could have severance of the defendants and now unindicted co-conspirators, once indicted, and they would say, I want to call so-and-so, and I want the government to give immunity, but the government doesn't have to give immunity. Anyhow, you get the idea that we have people talking nonsense about what can happen in a courtroom, something like what got us in this jam in the first place, in which key people, including Trump, ran around with these scenarios, each time escalating what they were doing. They had 61 cases, none of them showed fraud. They had phony electors, and they tried to run a scam using those, and they tried to continue the counting after the states had another 10 days. In other words, they wanted to run crashing into the actual transfer of power. So we have a situation in which they want the free speech without responsibility to change the election without due process, meaning fundamental fairness. So, what did we see today? Well, we saw a couple of things. We saw people curious, but one of the biggest demonstrations at a courthouse that I remember, I can't remember anything like it, during Clinton, there was a picture that I found very impressive, and it was of the First Lady, Hillary Clinton, surrounded, 7, 8, 10 deep of reporters in a circle outside the courthouse after she, I think, testified before the grand jury. And it was, it made a very impressive picture. But there was as much support for her, given the offense didn't go to the core values of being a president, but it did go to the core values of being a person, and that was something between Clinton and his wife. And a lot of people were unsatisfied because he had lied to them about that when the crisis arose. But we're in a whole different world when we're talking about Trump. And how did it go? There was a chant continuously among the crowd about letting him go to jail. Lock him up. Lock him up. Lock him up. There were people saying it. And then there were people carrying signs about their displeasure with Trump. We've seen three kinds of receptions, New York, Florida, and now this. And the number of people coming has declined. The amount of money that Trump has spent on lawyers has moved him from something like 200 or more million to something like 10 million. And I guess he hopes to stir the pot and get more today. But the bottom line is that Trump, as he left the court outside of his plane to go back to New Jersey, he basically said, they're out there to persecute me, trying to condition the jury pool. So, how should we feel about today? We should feel good. I told you I appeared before this judge the other day. I don't have enough experience to know how she'll do this, but she has quite a background to be a judge. And the sense I have is she has the will, if she decides something's right, to go forward and fight for it. And that's critically important. She's had the experience of dealing with an effort by the president to obstruct the January 6th committee. I think that's important. She's had an opportunity to consider the many cases of those ground troops that were dumb enough to, and vile enough to do what Trump wanted them to do. When all else failed, let's resort to violence. So I think we have in place the prosecutor who's found a vision that's carried him to this day, talking about Jack Smith. We have a judge that has enough experience to take on this enormous responsibility and difficult task, but she'll do it. I think those are two people that have the character to rise to the occasion. And we have a people in D.C., in and out of government, a real blend of America, who, sort of like New Yorkers, who knew this guy when he came to Washington. D.C. knows this guy. But I think we also have a lot of people who will answer the question, can you put aside any bias you have against Trump and listen only to the evidence? And I respectfully submit, if they listen only to the evidence, they'll convict them on every count, all 4 conspiracies, and they'll send them to the Huskow. And that is something like justice. We made a mistake with Nixon. We thought it was a good idea to cut short the pain, to let him go, to make a deal. Not this guy. Our nation, maybe going back to Goldwater, earlier than that in terms of our failures about equal justice under law, but going to Goldwater and going to Bush and going to Trump, you see a trend line that has compromised America, that suggests that we could answer wrongly the question of Benjamin Franklin when asked if we had a republic. And he said, you do, if you can keep it. And I think that what transpired today, which is why I think it's a day of joy, is to get us back on track, to get us going toward the view that we are a republic. And as I said on Ari last night, and maybe others have seen the same thing, we didn't prosecute, quote, the insurrection, not directly. What we prosecuted was the objective and the offense that was intended. And it was to compromise the right to vote and have the vote be counted. That's what this is about, democracy. And what is the opposing force? What are the means for compromising that? Autocracy. Lying about fraud. Lying that you're an elector. Lying that the vice president has the authority to shortchange the votes of all Americans and to allow there to be this sporting way of choosing Trump again, though he was not the winner of the election, nor was there any flaw that would give him the election. So we are in that special place, and we're going forward, and I think hope abides in America today, and the viciousness, the worthlessness, the evil of Trump is manifest, and to more people than those who are listening to me, you who are listening to me, and people that will ever hear what we're talking about, but who can't but see what happened in court. So Thomas Jefferson wrote that the people get it right. This was his belief in democracy. And when I first read it, because I had a lot of his notes and papers, and there are marvelous productions of these things, he said he believed that ultimately they may not get it at first, but democracy works. And I think what we see today, and what gives me joy, is the working of democracy. The working of those people who believe in the rule of law, who have a vision about what America was and must be again. So I say good evening from my cathedral of trees, and I'll be glad to talk to you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.